On today's show, the Atlanta Hawks hold serve at home against the Washington Wizards. It was not always pretty, but in the end, a rather comfortable win at home and a third straight victory for the Hawks. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1579 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And today's show is brought to you by the folks at FanDuel. And right now, if you're a new customer, get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And also want to tell you at the top of the podcast, as I always do, to make us your first listen each and every day here at Locked On Hawks, please subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. We are on audio-only platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and as well as Google Podcasts, etc. And we're also over on YouTube on the video side. And today's show, we'll be diving into what became an interesting win for the Hawks, 130-121 over the Washington Wizards. This game was both closer than this and not as close as this in some respects. The Hawks were down by as many as 10 points, actually, in the first half of this contest. Came back, had a big run in the second quarter, and then another big quarter in the third quarter, actually, led by as many as 26 points later in this contest. And then in the fourth quarter, I won't say it was garbage time because the Hawks were kind of maybe not letting it be garbage time. They did not play very well the last 6, 7, 8 minutes of this game, but in the end, it didn't matter. And they were able to hold on for a 9-point victory. So it's a third straight win for the Hawks. Obviously, that's a very positive place to be after an 0-2 start. And with all the consternation that was out there in the previous form from fans and everybody else about an 0-2 start, 3-2 now, 2-1 at home, feeling pretty solidly about where they are with 2 days off to come and then a road trip to New Orleans coming up on Saturday. But we'll dive in sort of now with some takeaways and look, to sort of set the stage a little bit here at the top of the podcast. This is sort of the epitome of a taking care of business kind of game for the Hawks. Washington entered the season with the lowest projected win total in the entire NBA. This is a bad basketball team. Let's just be honest about that. They also came into the night with a bottom 3 net rating, a bottom 3 defensive rating so far this year. They were playing without Daniel Gafford, who isn't a superstar, but certainly is their best available center. So Washington is not very good, and the Hawks were largely at full strength. Trae Young actually was on the injury report briefly from Tuesday evening into Wednesday with Achilles soreness. He seemed to be just fine and was cleared to play before the game actually started. And by the way, just some soreness there for Trae, according to Quinn Snyder. Pregame was good to go from the start, but we mentioned that out loud. But anyway, the Hawks were facing a Wizards team that, again, is going to be bad, even with everyone available. Not a very good basketball team. They do have a bunch of decent role players, some quality guys that I like on the supporting margins, including 3 Hawks legends on this Wizards team: DeLon Wright, Danilo Gallinari, and Mike Muscala are all on this team, which is interesting for people like me who've been covering this team for a long time. But it is an awful defensive team by the roster. And then they have some guys who can score like Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma, but no real stars. And all that said, the Hawks were 9.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel in this game. Of course, that's pretty familiar because the Hawks won this game by 9 points. There was some legitimate point spread drama down the stretch if you enjoy that kind of thing. But listen, this is the prime example of a game. If you are a good team, which I believe the Hawks to be this year, at least a pretty good team at the very least, that you need to win in the NBA. You're at home against a bad team, no back-to-back. You were at home on Monday, no travel, and you're supposed to win those games, and you need to win those games more often than not, and the Hawks were able to do that in this one. Again, they did flirt a little bit late in this game with sort of a collapse of some kind, and we'll come back to it later on. They played down to the competition early and late in this one, but the middle of the game was all Hawks, and that was probably more indicative of the disparity between these two teams in a lot of different ways. And again, in the end, a fairly comfortable victory for Atlanta. The offense was better than the defense, I thought, in this game. It was a super fast-paced game, so 130 points is a lot, obviously, where the Hawks were in this one. Not as crazy efficiency-wise as you might think. About a 118 offensive rating. That's obviously quite good. And they did that with only 9 of 32 from 3. So if this Hawks team is going to shoot that poorly from 3, having a 118 offensive rating is pretty darn good. Again, it's worth noting Washington's bad defensively, but the Hawks were 29 of 32 at the free throw line. They took a lot and made a lot. They shot 60+% from 2-point range. That's obviously very good as well. 64 points in the paint in this game. That's an excellent figure. The other issue besides 3-point shooting was turnovers. They had 21 turnovers in this game. That just can't happen, especially against a bad defense. And granted, 6 of those were in the fourth quarter when it was kind of sloppy down the stretch, but still 15 through 3 quarters is too many in itself. they did make up a little bit of that with a 35% offensive rebound rate. So they were able to get some second chances in this game. That helps to offset the possession battle losses of a turnover battle loss. And they got in transition a little bit. 19 fast break points is a very good number. So it was pretty much like high highs and low lows in this game offensively. They were balanced, though. 7 guys in double figures is a very good mark to have for this team. Also, their entire top 8 had at least 8 points in this contest. So offensively, it wasn't perfect by any means, but they were better on offense and defense in this game, in my opinion. Speaking of which, the defense. So really, really rough in the first quarter. That's my opinion. And then a little bit better as the game went along until the fourth, where they kind of gave up a lot of like just weirdness, like some bad fouls and bad turnovers and 39 points. I'm actually going to let Quinn Snyder set the stage a little bit for this, actually. You'll hear my question about this. I actually asked Quinn post-game about the defense, generally speaking, because pre-game I had followed up with Quinn about like what they're looking for Washington. He talked about them playing small and kind of being a little bit more offensive, more focused on that end of the floor. So you'll hear my question and then Quinn's answer, I should say, to my question about the defense, in which he was not terribly happy with that side of the ball.
You talked pregame a little bit about how Washington was playing small and how that was something you had to be prepared for. How did you think your defense handled that today?
I didn't think we had a great defensive night. You know, I think we've played in stretches, but we haven't been at the level that we need to be at. We've made some plays. Like I said, we've gone on some runs when we have played good defense, but there's been too many possessions where we're not executing, where someone's not shifted in the right place. We're not running back into our shifts. Maybe we're back, but we're not communicating. Our pickup points aren't high enough on the ball, and it's everybody. And it's not for lack of care or effort. I think we just got to you got to be persistent, and we got to keep grinding. And, that's what this league is, and that's what it means to become a solid defensive team. You just can't take plays off.
So there you go on that. Obviously, it's a win, so he's not going to, go crazy. But he clearly was not very happy about the defense in this game, and I don't blame him because the Wizards got what they wanted to a lot of the time in this contest. They shot 50% from the field, which is a red flag on some level, and despite the fact that they were 10 of 40 from 3. So it could have gone really pear-shaped for the Hawks if Washington had even a decent shooting game, much less a bad one. The Hawks lost turnover battle by 10, 21-11. That's glaring, and it was not just giving the ball away, but also not forcing a ton of turnovers, which as we've discussed the last couple of weeks, this Hawks team, the way that they're trying to defend scheme-wise, they have to create some sort of havoc, or it's going to be a lot of layups and a lot of easy buckets. They did hold the Wizards to 14 free throw attempts. That's a good number, a very low number. But transition stuff was really an issue. A lot of that was bad turnovers by the Hawks side, but 27 fast break points is really unacceptably bad if you are the Hawks. And they gave up 40 attempts at the rim. And if you watch the tape back, and I have now, the point of attack was kind of reminiscent of last year at times. Like it was just a lot of like olays at the point of attack, I'll say. Again, not all that, but like illustrated pretty heavily, in my opinion, by perimeter glaring weaknesses, I'll say, along the way. So what I would say is this is kind of victory that leaves coaches with plenty to teach about and be frustrated about, which I think we kind of heard from Quinn. I think multiple times he talked about like not downplaying the win. It's like tough to win in the NBA, and he talked about that multiple times in the post game tonight. But I think he certainly was not happy with the way things ended or started. And I guess on the bright side, it's kind of a good thing for the team in some respects. Like you want to win and play super well, but unlike the previous 2 games where they just kind of turned the Jets on, this one was a little bit more stuck in the mud at different times. So I think that certainly they'll have at least one full practice between now and Saturday, and plenty to go over if you are Quinn Snyder. But still, the Hawks were dominant in the middle of this game. Certainly, they were the better team, and that's all they had to do at the end of this one to get out with a victory. All right, as we always do, we'll dive into the sort of nuts and bolts of this one, the game flow, how it all went. But first, a word from our sponsors on today's podcast. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. You can step into the action this NFL or NBA season with America's #1 sportsbook, and that is FanDuel. If you're a new customer, you can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Beyond the awesome perks of signing up with FanDuel right now, they have all the stuff you're looking for across the sports betting space. That includes point spreads and over-unders. They have player props and money lines and future bets and game props and all of that fun stuff in one place at FanDuel. The app is safe and secure. They cover the entire range of sports as well. Beyond the NBA, which we cover in depth on this podcast, they have the NFL, college football. They have MLB, which just ended actually on Wednesday evening, but they'll have much more over the winter, I should say. College basketball, golf, tennis, soccer, auto racing, and much more. They also have plenty of options involving the Hawks, including the full scope of offerings for Saturday's game in New Orleans, where the Hawks will take on the Pelicans. And I'm sure they'll have plenty to discuss in the midst of between now and then, let's just say. And now is the best possible time. Join up with the folks at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check out the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network with an offer that you're absolutely not going to want to miss at this point in time. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, so I promise I will not do this every time the Hawks change their lineup this year, but I know there's a lot more talk about the Hawks starting lineup change. And if they had lost this game, it would have been even louder, I'm sure. But Saddiq Bey started at the power forward spot for Atlanta. It was not shocking to me. I was kind of surprised, but there's also a little bit of backstory here that I will share with you now. I won't do the whole spiel again. If you listen to this podcast regularly, you'll know that I'm not the biggest person who cares about starting lineups that much, but I know Hawks fans do, and I understand that as well on some level. I want to play some pre-game audio for you from Quinn Snyder, actually. He got a question from Brian Oliver of Bally Sports Southeast about the power forward spot in general. And you'll probably hear this on the question, but he did not actually ask about the starting lineup. It was just about the power forward spot in general. And he mentioned, of course, Jalen and Saddiq, even DeAndre Hunter. And in the answer, as you'll hear in a second from Quinn Snyder, he went there pretty quickly. And I think that kind of told us a little bit about what was going to happen in a second. But here's what Quinn said about the position, kind of what he thinks about it philosophically. And I'll let his work do the talking.
Quinn, I know there's been some questions coming to the season about filling that 4 position. Can you talk about how well you feel like Saddiq, Jalen, and even DeAndre have managed to fill that void and be really, really productive?
Yeah, I mean, those 3 guys you mentioned, there was never a question for me about the 4 position. It kind of meaning we have some good players there, and people get fixated on starting. I mean, and it is what it is. I mean, if you go watch a game in Europe, they start different lineups all the time, and no one thinks anything of it. People get fixated on rotations. If you looked at our rotation the other night, it was all over the place because that's what the game dictated. And I think, particularly in Saddiq and Jalen's case, because they've both started games, they haven't thought about it the way that the general public thinks about it. They haven't thought about it the way the PA announcer thinks about it when he announces them, and that's refreshing because I think it shows, their commitment to the bottom line, which is not the stat sheet, it's the wins, and they're doing everything they can to do that. And as you mentioned, Brian, those are 2 players. They're different, and they're both very good at the things that they do. And for us to have that depth, and you mentioned Hunt too, I think that's, sometimes it's not a one for those guys are all 3 playing together and playing off each other. And, I think it's something that can continue to improve and already is the strength of our team.
All right, so there you go on Quinn. I also shared that answer as sort of the transcript on Twitter. People were, disagree with that. And I'm not saying you have to agree. I'm just telling you, and this is why I want to pass it along, kind of the backstory on what Quinn has said publicly about this. He's been pretty expansive in the thoughts about this. It seems like the team is buying in. Even Quinn, after the game tonight, talks about the rotations from the game on Monday and how they're all on message. Trey said the same thing about how everybody doesn't really care right now about roles and minutes and rotations, and it's all kind of changing. And Quinn talks about that in there and starting and all that stuff. And I get that some fans don't care about that. I don't blame you necessarily. I would have probably just stuck with Jalen personally, but I also am not outraged in the way that some are. One more note on this, and Quinn wasn't going to tell anybody else this kind of information, but it is kind of impossible not to notice that Jalen in the 2 games that he started were against the teams that are very, very big in the front court. It's Milwaukee with Giannis and Brook, and then it's Minnesota with Towns and Gobert. I'm not sure that's the reason. I'm not sure that's the whole reason or anything, but it's not a coincidence, I don't think, because the other 3 games, the Hawks were playing smaller teams. Tonight was obviously a smaller opponent, and I wonder how much that has to do with all that. So we'll see. It could be Jalen again on Saturday. It wouldn't surprise me at all. They're playing against a team that has Zion on it, probably against New Orleans on Saturday. So maybe go back to that. But I think that mostly what it is right now in early November, is that Quinn is tinkering still and messing with combinations. And I think that no one is out of the 2 of them is guaranteed to start. And that's okay. I think that's not a problem. And I think, look, for me, big picture, like super big picture, I would say to fans, Like, I'd rather have a coach in Quinn that's going to be willing to experiment and not be so stagnant in their ways in the way that the previous regime was. And you would not like that. And I know there was like legitimate outrage from some about this. And it is what it is. I don't really think about this that much right now as far as like huge sweeping takeaways, because look, Jalen didn't even play that well tonight and still ended up playing 24 minutes off the bench. Like, he's not going to stop playing. And him and Bay Bay played more than he did. It doesn't actually matter. This is actually season low for Jalen in minutes, but regardless, I want to at least lead with that on this part of the podcast, because I know I got a lot of questions about that, and hopefully it won't become a every night topic, but maybe it will be. And there you go. Okay, diving into the game itself now, the Hawks had, again, as talked about earlier, a really rough start. They allowed 14 points on the first 8 trips from the Wizards in this game. A lot of easy layups because the perimeter stuff just blow by after blow by defensively. It was really rough. Also, DeAndre Hunter, who actually had a big game in this one by the end statistically, led the team. No, actually didn't lead the team. It was one short of leading the team with 23 points. He was really, really rough actually in the first quarter. He was better than that after that, but he was actually started this game 0-4 from the floor with 2 turnovers in the first 6 minutes plus 2 fouls. So, a rough one for DeAndre at the beginning. Rotationally, no big surprises. AJ Griffin was clearly the 9th of 9, but he played 12 minutes in this contest. Bogey was pretty good with a little bit of juice when he came in the game. I have to say this as a longtime observer of basketball. There was an absolutely vintage Danilo Gallinari possession in this one where he actually had a pump fake, one dribble, and then a pull-up jump shot that it's just kind of unblockable because he's like 6'11", and it's just kind of funny stuff, and I love to see that as a longtime appreciator of Gallo's game. But the Hawks were really struggling on offense and defense, actually, in the first quarter. They were down by as many as 10 points in the early portion of the second quarter, down 5 at the end of the first, just in the mud in a lot of ways. The Hawks had 7 turnovers before the Wizards actually had more than 3, so that was kind of a problem. The game finally swung on a 21-4 run mid-second quarter to go up by 9 points with like 2.5 minutes to go in the first half. Crucially, they got 5 straight stops, which is a big, big thing in this game. And then Hunter had back-to-back 3-point plays. It was good to see him kind of come alive with more aggressiveness, attacking the rim. He had been struggling before that, as referenced before. A big lob from Trey to Capella. And then the play of the night, highlight-wise, was this absurd wraparound pass that Trae Young threw to DeJounte Murray for a 3. Just the kind of pass that I would describe as one that like no one can even think about making. It's like a pass that 10 guys maybe in the league can make. And Trae is just absurd. And there it was. He delivered it. Can't really add anything else there. Just a crazy, awesome play. Trae also hit the ground like 3 or 4 times in a row. And the last time he didn't get a whistle that he wanted, and it was a technical foul. So by the way, also while we're here, DeJounte Murray and Jordan Poole were going at it a lot in the first half, notably. But anyway, the Hawks were up by 8 at the end of the half, despite some roughness at the beginning. Murray had 16 points, all that stuff. After halftime, they broke it open, 14-5 to open the third quarter to go up by 17 points. I thought they did a good job pushing the pace in that period of time. Trae got downhill for a layup to set up DeJounte for a layup, and then a 3-point play by Capella to cut that run early in the third quarter. Foul trouble actually befit DeAndre Hunter. Had 4 fouls early in the third, but after that, they got the lead up to 22 after another 3-point play by Capella. The Hawks had 50 points in the paint in the first 2.5 quarters. They were really attacking the rim effectively. They were up by 22 points despite bad 3-point shooting. All that fun stuff. DeJounte had a big windmill dunk actually in the third quarter that was notable. But then Washington, in the first kind of signal that the game wasn't quite over, had an 8-0 run late in the third with just an awful turnover by Hunter in the backcourt to give up a layup. The Hawks, though, still like kind of stabilized. Okongwu had the first 4 points in the fourth quarter. Actually, it looked like for a second that he made his first 3-pointer of the year, but it was actually ended up being ruled a 2, so he's still without a 3 this year, unfortunately for him. But they were up by 24 after a bogey 3, and they were up by 26 after a layup by Saddiq Bey, and it felt like a dagger. I even wrote that in my notes, like, all right, this game's probably over. And the Hawks kind of maybe took that to heart too much. They mailed it in a lot. For the next 5-6 minutes, they were really, really rough. Hunter, fortunately, made a couple of pretty tough jump shots, or it would have been even more dire. They played so poorly in that stretch that they had to go back to Trae Young, who they probably didn't need to have to go back to. I'm sure that that might have been a little bit too careful from Quinn Snyder with the game on Saturday, but they got tighter than they probably should have. Let's just say in the fourth, they were up 15 points with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, and still couldn't fully like pump the game because they kept turning the ball over. Like Murray had one in the backcourt that led to a layup, for example. They ended up winning by 9, and like it was really like they made a total utter mess of the fourth quarter. And not even the fourth quarter, like the last 8 minutes of the game. Because again, they won the opening portion of the fourth quarter decisively. to go up by 26 points. And the Hawks lost the fourth quarter by 8 points. So basically they went minus 17 in the last 8 minutes of the fourth. And it looked like, they were not playing well. It was like the foot was off the gas, let's just say. And fortunately for them, they were up by as many points as they were, and Washington wasn't able to kind of fully run through the tape. But a little bit of a letdown there. But look, regardless, it is what it is. And I think the Hawks did what they needed to do in this game. That's kind of my overarching mindset of this one, is like taking care of business. It wasn't pretty necessarily all the way through. But the highs were high, the lows were kind of low, but it's a win, and they'll file that one away for the future. All right, one more break here from us on today's podcast. We'll have much more on the player-by-player breakdowns on today's show. All right, and we'll dive into the players now. Only 9 guys appeared for Atlanta in this game. AJ Griffin was the 9th of 9. He didn't do much of anything, honestly. AJ, I don't think he was terrible, but actually he was minus 14 in his minutes. No points, no rebounds or assists either. Kind of a weirdly quiet night. 0-2 from the floor, both threes. I don't think he was awful, but kind of a non-factor. I thought Bogey was pretty good, but not shooting the ball super well right now. 1 of 5 from 3 in this game. Had 12 points and 3 rebounds. 1 assist, 1 block, and 1 steal, and plus 8 off the bench. The offense certainly usually kicks up a notch with Bogey on the floor. That happened in this game, I thought. Jalen wasn't bad, but it's probably his worst game of the year so far out of the first 5. 8 points, did have 11 rebounds. That's actually very impressive in 24 minutes. A couple of huge high-flying ones, but had 5 turnovers, a couple of weirdly bad passes. Had a weird traveling violation where he kind of got caught in between what he wanted to do. And then 0-2 from 3, 3-5 from 2. Defensively, a couple breakdowns, nothing bad, just like not super locked in. I don't think he was bad again, but plus 10 off the bench, obviously that's good. That's good enough. But he'll have better nights for sure. Kongu was really good, I thought. I thought he was probably the better center in this one, better matchup for him in a lot of ways. We'll come back to in a second with regard to Clint. But I thought Kongu closed the game and was effective. He actually ended up minus 8 because he was on the in the fourth quarter. But 16 points, 11 rebounds in 27 minutes. 6 of 7 on twos, 4-4 at the free throw line, 2 assists, 1 turnover, 1 block. I thought he played well, honestly. He was versatile. Again, from the matchup for him in some ways because Washington was playing pretty small, and that plays into O's hands a lot. But I thought he played really well. Speaking of Capella, 10 points, 11 rebounds, and a team best plus 17 for Clint. I will say I thought he was much better after his first stint. It wasn't all on him, but he was part of the problem, I would say, is the way I would phrase it in the first quarter. But after that, he was much more dialed in. But I actually thought it was interesting. This is kind of the last quote I promised you from Clint Snyder on today's podcast. But pregame, he actually got a very open-ended question about Clint and kind of what he does for them, where he's sort of underrated in some respects from Lauren Williams of the AJC. So here's the answer that Quinn gave, and I think it's always good context. You probably get more deep answers on individual players in pregame, and this is what he had to say about Clint.
And then I wanted to ask about Clint. He's one of those guys that, a lot of the good things that he does doesn't necessarily show up on the box score. So for you, for these first 4 games, what have you seen from him that may have gone unnoticed by, the rest of us?
Well, the one thing that should go noticed that does show up in the box score is his defensive rebounding. And I think that's, a significant thing that he gives us. His ability to put pressure on the rim in pick and roll a lot of times may not end up in, sometimes it does where he gets a lob threat. But there's a lot of situations where he's, creating shots for other people. And then I think defensively, you see the guards at the point of attack guarding the ball, but equally important at the beginning of the possessions, he's usually involved if there's a pick and roll action, and he finds himself in that situation as well. So the way that those 2 players work in tandem defending the pick and roll at the point of attack is something that that he's really embraced and is good at.
So there you go. Obviously, it doesn't tell the entire story of Capella, but rebounding-wise, obviously, defensively, he does the right things. I know, there are certain nights where Capella matchup-wise is going to be not as good as a Kongu. And the same goes in reverse as well. Smaller, quicker teams, with the way the Hawks are guarding in particular, not really playing a lot of drop anymore, Capella can be limited against those teams. And the Wizards is kind of one of those matchups. But he's still an elite rebounder, obviously. and rim protector, all that stuff. So, I think he played better as the game went along, but Okongwu played more, and that's going to happen sometimes. I talked about that all summer long as well. Like, there will be matchups and nights when Okongwu has it and Clint doesn't, and that's fine. That's part of the appeal of having two guys who are good at center, and that is part of the formula for Atlanta. Saddiq Bey, 14 points, 7 rebounds, and a steal. 4-10 from the floor, only 2 of 7 from 3. I thought Saddiq competed well in this game. He wasn't like, I think the plus 10, minus 10 for him and Jalen. Maybe not him and Jalen. Him and Hunter with different splits. Anyway, I thought Bey was fine. He competed well. He rebounded well. He attacked the rim. He didn't shoot it great, but I thought he kind of did what you needed him to do. And by the way, it's not his fault. I know there's some Hawks fans that made this into a negative thing about Saddiq starting. Saddiq's a very valuable player. I think Jalen's got I would say has higher upside and is certainly does things that Saddiq can't do, but it's not a negative about Saddiq Bey. DeAndre Hunter, weird game for DeAndre Hunter. 23 points on 18 shooting possessions. That's fine. He wasn't like incredibly efficient, but certainly very solid there. 7 rebounds is really good for him. 3 assists, 2 steals, all good numbers. Also turned the ball over 5 times. That's way too many for a player of his usage rate. Also 5 fouls. Defensively, not his best work. And then the first quarter was like just weirdly awful. But from there on, he actually played well. So look, this is I think this is really the 4th game in a row that he's played pretty well. And I don't want to get too aggressive. I think some Hawks fans got maybe over their skis a little bit today with regard to Hunter. But if this is what they get, again, if the last 4 games, because he was not great in Charlotte, but the last 4 games, if that's even near what they're going to get from Hunter this year, that will help them quite a bit. He is arguably one of the pivot points on the roster, at least in my opinion, and he has been playing well, and that definitely helps them when he plays well because his defense is very valuable, and then his offense can be floor raising if he can get shots to fall. The backcourt was actually pretty good in this one, I thought. They combined Trey and Ajante to shoot 51% from the floor and 4 of 8 from 3. We'll take that. Trey kind of made fun of himself. He still hasn't made a ton of shots this year. Got to the line, though, 9 times. 23 and 10 for Trey. 2 steals. A couple of great passes for sure. He's still a little bit rusty inside the arc. But that's like only the one complaint I have. I thought Trey's been playing like all court game pretty well. And then Murray stayed hot. Like he cooled off a little bit in the second half, a little bit, but still like the last 6 quarters, it's been outrageous for Murray. 54 points in the last 6 quarters is pretty crazy, but 24 tonight, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, 3-5 from 3, and 10-15 from the floor. Did have 4 turnovers, but was plus 15, and like he's obviously in a groove right now, so that's good to see. Hopefully that will continue if you are a Hawks fan. So that's all I have on the player-by-player stuff in this particular game. But again, like a win is a win is a win, and in the NBA, style points matter. Like obviously, we're going to talk about this stuff a little bit in depth. It's my job to analyze the games, but coaches will tell you, win's a win's a win. Your point differential is certainly it's sort of a good indicator of how good you are. But as far as the results are concerned, just get over the finish line, and the Hawks did in this game. So from here, the Hawks have a couple of days off, actually, after 4 games in 6 days. I don't know if they're going to practice tomorrow or not, but at least they'll have one between now and the next game, which is Saturday on the road in New Orleans. If you're interested in the Pelicans, they actually play on Thursday against Detroit. If you want to watch that one and listen to this podcast before then, I will have at least one episode between now and that game. I'm not sure exactly when, so stay tuned to this podcast and please subscribe to the show. And also, I will stop doing this eventually on the feed, but for those asking, and I have a couple of people again on the podcast the last few days. I know not everybody listens to every show, so I am told there will be postcasts in the audio only feeds for Locked On Hawks podcast during the game. After games this year. Postcasts not hosted by me, but in the Locked On Hawks feed on the audio feeds. So that means places like Spotify, Apple, Google. If you were subscribed, that will pop up in your feed. I got questions about that the last few days. There have been a couple of those already. That comes from the Locked On Sports Atlanta show on the network, on the Locked On Podcast Network. We're all one big family here, and they should be labeled differently so you can see which show is which. I will not be on those shows, but nothing changes for me. Still the same wall-to-wall coverage. I'm not leaving. And almost 1,600 episodes. We're nearing 1,600 episodes on this podcast. It's been quite a long time for 7+ years on this feed. So I'm not going anywhere. I promise you. Just some extra bonus content from the folks at the Locked On Podcast Network and Locked On Sports Atlanta. So stay tuned for that. If you'd like to download that podcast, check it out and listen to it if you enjoy extra Hawks coverage. All right. With that said, please subscribe to the show anywhere you get your podcasts. audio platforms like Apple and Spotify, also video side over on YouTube. I'm also doing some shorts now after the game. The podcast network actually is asking us to do some like 1 minute bite-sized shorts in post-game, so those will be up there as well. If you're a subscriber, please like the show on YouTube as well and subscribe. Also, ratings and reviews on audio platforms are very much appreciated. Apple especially, where you can leave some written comments about the show. You can also follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there if you'd like to at BT Rowland. I also write about the Hawks regularly at patreon.com/BT Rowland as well. I appreciate everyone listening to the show tonight, and always check us out as we get into the weekend as well. And again, one more time, we'll have at least one more show between now and the game on Saturday, so stay tuned for that. Subscribe to the podcast, and we'll see you all next time.